今天就想跟大家聊聊，我是因为什么被辞退的。
Today, I want to talk to everyone about the reason I was dismissed. I am 34 years old and was an executive at our company. My position covered multiple responsibilities. First, because we are an internet company, my work was related to operations. Secondly, I was also the HR head and responsible for administrative and legal matters. Other than the business and finance departments, other miscellaneous tasks were basically handled by me. The issue started when our company recently needed to rent a new office, and I was in charge of this task. I negotiated all the conditions with the landlord smoothly, and most of the things were provided for free by the landlord. The boss agreed as well, and we signed the contract. Just when we were about to make the payment, the boss suddenly changed his mind. He demanded that the landlord provide additional partitions for free, even though the landlord had already made partitions for us. The landlord said he could do it, but because of the strict fire safety regulations in Beijing, we needed to bear part of the cost. The issue got stuck here, and the boss questioned whether I had rented the office at a reasonable price. I explained that the price was agreed upon by you before I negotiated with the landlord. The boss felt that I was not standing on the company's side but on the landlord's side. I thought it was unreasonable for us to repeatedly ask the landlord for additional work after the contract was signed. However, the boss insisted that it was not acceptable and that the landlord must make more additional work for free. Also, the boss requested that the lease term be extended by 10 days. In the end, we had a big argument over the lease term. I asked my boss if he thought I had rented the office at an expensive price. He said he did not think so. I asked him what he meant, but he did not respond directly. At the end of the argument, I asked him if he was assessing me. Then the boss said, yes, he was assessing me. I was very angry and told the boss that if he was going to assess me in this way, it was unnecessary. Then the boss hung up the phone. Shortly after, he informed me that I would not need to come to work after the end of this month. I asked him who would take over my work, and he said he would arrange it. I simply said, fine.
9岁，我终于被裁员了，这是我意料中的事情。
At 39, I was finally laid off, which was something I anticipated and even looked forward to. I am a mother of 2 children, a middle-aged woman struggling in the workplace. Although I am considered part of the company's management, I constantly worry about being eliminated and do not dare to slack off even a little. Countless times, I rush to the airport, neglecting my children, my elderly parents, and myself, always on the go. Recently, a comment from a female executive of a well-known company caused a public outcry online. She said, "Why should I consider my employees' families? I'm not their mother-in-law." The workplace is indeed cold and harsh. I have also received similar remarks from my boss, so I chose to lie flat. Finally, at the end of March this year, I was relieved to receive 13 months of severance pay and left the company where I had worked for 10 years. I decided to start rebuilding my life. In the first month at home, I took over the household duties that should have been mine from my parents-in-law. I cleaned the house thoroughly, which took me a whole week. Although I was exhausted, seeing the tidy home gave me a strange sense of satisfaction. A middle-aged woman laid off at 39 seems to have lost a lot, but I also gained a lot. I have more time to accompany my children, help them with their studies, play with them, and exercise with them. At the same time, I started learning new skills. I will witness my own growth while also beginning to look for new job opportunities. So, women should also reject middle-aged anxiety and let's embark on the journey to happiness together.
43岁，我被裁员了。
At the age of 43, I experienced a layoff. Specifically, this happened in March 2023, and now I have been unemployed for more than a year. I was forced to leave Microsoft during their global layoffs in 2023, and I had only been with the company for just over 6 months. After receiving this news, I decided to take a break. Since entering the IT industry in 2015, I had only ever taken a weekend off between job changes. This time, I decided to travel and relax. After traveling for a while, I felt it was time to return to work, as finding a job takes time. Around last summer, I started sending out resumes, but opportunities seemed scarce, and I didn't find any particularly ideal jobs for a long time. Every morning, I felt extremely anxious, and the first thing I did after getting up was to check job sites for new postings. By the end of last year and the beginning of this year, I was interviewing most frequently, and it was the most torturous period for me. I repeatedly failed interviews and couldn't secure a job. Despite the topic of unemployment at 35 being discussed for many years, I had always been blindly confident about this. At 41 and 42, I was still at the peak of my career. Looking back at my background, I graduated from a prestigious university and have nearly 20 years of work experience, all in top foreign tech companies. Even while working at Amazon and Microsoft, many companies were still reaching out to me with offers. But why, just a few months after being laid off, did my professional knowledge and work experience seem to disappear? Why couldn't I achieve good results in interviews, even though I prepared as diligently as I did for exams, where effort typically led to success? These questions often caused me great anxiety and unwillingness to accept the situation. However, not all problems have clear answers. If I must find an answer, perhaps it is that fate has arranged for me to live a different life in the second half. Is this the thought that brings me the most peace? Working should not be the only option. I should explore more possibilities. When I think this way, I start looking for new directions. During this exploration, I increasingly realized that I do not want to lead a mundane life now. The second half of my life is just beginning, and I have decided to start over. If necessary, I am prepared to open a small shop and give it a try. For middle-aged women facing unemployment, all you need is the courage to start over.
公司这一波裁员来得气势汹汹。
The company's layoff action this time came swiftly and decisively. Last night at around 8 p.m., I received a message from HR, scheduling a phone call at 10 a.m. today. I initially thought HR might negotiate a salary reduction or job reassignment, and I was considering accepting it. Unexpectedly, our call came promptly at 10 a.m., with no unnecessary pleasantries, directly discussing the termination agreement, mainly the compensation plan. There was no suspense, just the regular N+1. I have worked at this company for 3 years and 9 months, N is calculated as 4, so N+1 means a compensation of 5 months' salary, totaling less than 200,000 yuan. The phone conversation lasted less than 5 minutes, and I had nothing much to say, just clarified a few unclear points. Next was the process, which was particularly fast and simple, all handled online, through the OA system with approval from relevant leaders. After completing the process, all company account information was deactivated. I received the HR call at 10 a.m., and by 5 p.m., I had the stamped electronic version of the termination certificate, and by around 5:30 p.m., this month's salary and compensation were fully credited. This speed made it feel unreal, compared to previous job changes where there was a month-long handover period and delays in the next month's salary. This time, the speed left me somewhat dazed, as I hadn't had time to react before entering unemployment. During the entire termination process, HR and the responsible persons at each stage must have been extremely busy, reportedly handling nearly 100 termination processes in the past 2 days. The Mid-Autumn Festival is coming soon, followed by the National Day holiday. It's truly a case of some rejoicing while others feel sorrow.
41岁女性被裁员意味着什么？
What does it mean for a 41-year-old woman to be laid off? The impact of the 3-year pandemic has reached the company I work for. Since the second half of last year, colleagues have been leaving one after another. Before the Spring Festival, Human Resources talked to me, either a significant pay cut and job transfer or being laid off. I had to choose the latter. There were 2 reasons. First, I couldn't accept a significant pay cut, and second, the long-term high-intensity work, coupled with the stress of raising a child on my own, had already drained my health. At the age of 40, my body encountered serious problems, and I had to stop and rest, following the doctor's advice for active treatment. After the Spring Festival, I completed the handover of my work and returned my computer and work badge. Despite having done psychological counseling for the entire Spring Festival, I still felt extremely confused and helpless at that moment. Who am I? Where am I? What should I do next? When I walked out of the office building and saw the bright sunlight overhead, I was very uncomfortable. It was different from the usual work days. In the past, when I walked out of the office building, it was always dark in winter, and in summer, the sun had already set. For many days afterward, I found it hard to adapt to a life where I didn't have to get up early, didn't have to spend nearly 2 hours squeezing onto buses and changing subways to get to work. I no longer had to think about the day's key tasks while brushing my teeth, or review my work before going to bed at night. There were no special tasks, no projects, no meetings. I often heard or saw the term midlife crisis, but I had never felt it. Before the human resources talk, I was still fantasizing about finding a higher paying, better benefited job next time I switched jobs. I didn't realize I was already over 40, nor did I realize the discrimination against women over 40 in the workplace, and the challenges to health for women over 40. Life is often unsatisfactory. For a 40-year-old woman, being laid off might mean the end of her entire career. In the days to come, I must follow the doctor's advice, actively cooperate with the treatment, and recover my health as soon as possible. Here, I want to express that relying solely on a job to maintain a stable life is very risky. I suggest that young friends plan ahead. It's very reasonable to prepare for a rainy day.
What should you do if you are suddenly laid off in middle age, especially when facing family and financial pressures? The situation can become very difficult. A month ago, a female friend of mine experienced exactly this. She was a regional director at a large company, with outstanding performance. While waiting for a promotion, she was suddenly laid off, and her work was distributed among 3 younger colleagues. The issue she faced was not only about losing face but also about the real financial pressure. Her daughter was studying abroad, requiring tens of thousands of dollars each year for tuition, and her elderly family members were also falling ill one after another. In this situation, she was on the brink of depression, and we all have to confront such unstable realities. We live in an era full of uncertainty. Your industry and company might experience drastic changes overnight, or the company might consider you too old. In the past, our expectation in the workplace was for stability and long-term security, but now that stability is no longer guaranteed. The previous educational system trained T-shaped talents, which means deep professional knowledge combined with broad exposure. However, this model no longer suits the rapidly changing environment of today. Some education experts both domestically and internationally are exploring new educational models, and some countries have even begun to implement them. They advocate for cultivating composite talents, which means building 2 pillars, the first related to your career, and the second related to your hobbies and interests. In your past experiences, is there something that seemed useless to your main job but brought you complete joy? When you engage with it or learn it, you don't feel tired but rather find it enjoyable. For example, another friend of mine previously worked in the clothing industry but had a great passion for desserts. Early last year, she opened a small dessert shop in Beijing. Despite the pandemic causing the clothing business to fail completely, the dessert shop became her savior. During the quarantine, she shared her dessert-making process on a social media account. As her account gained influence, many big brands approached her for collaboration. When I saw her recently, she said she had never felt so good. The dessert shop is small, but its revenue is excellent. She said she never expected that her small hobby would open up a whole new world for her. Even if your main job experiences turmoil, having a pillar built from your interests can still provide opportunities for survival and development. In this ever-changing era, no one can predict when a black swan event will occur. What we can do is proactively build a knowledge structure beyond our main job. In case of setbacks, we can turn those setbacks into opportunities.